What's up, Poland? Regular news and stories about Poland. As anyone who knows about Poland's troubled past knows, Poland sits between competing forces, always has and probably always will. And if you're interested in international politics, you've probably been seeing, whether you've been consuming American media, British media, or any other media source, rising, in fact, it's been going on for months, series of stories about the massing of Russian troops all across the Ukrainian border, and suggestions today on the Tuesday, the 25th, as I record this episode, that Russian troops are already crossing over the Ukrainian border. One thing's for sure, Russia is playing a dangerous game of geopolitical cat and mouse, which has at times seen the partners and countries and allies within NATO often at odds with each other. Many have called attention to Germany's relationship with Russia, both its current relationship and the relationship that some of its former leaders and serious and important politicians have with the country of Russia, and Russia's continued willingness to drive wedges in between partnerships, including in NATO and the European Union. Well, the Polish Prime Minister has been paying particular attention in remarks on a Facebook post recently, his name is Mateusz Morawiecki, to the fact that Germany has prevented Estonia from exporting German-made weapons to Ukraine. So at a time when NATO allies, including the United States, including the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, have been sending arms to Ukraine, including short-range anti-tank missiles, Germany has done its utmost best to see those arms and weapons stopped, at least the ones they have a control over. So I'll just quote here, he's been criticizing this decision, writing, "I observe with concern the situation in Ukraine and the reaction of our neighbors in Germany in the face of the threat from Russia. It is a great disappointment to see Germany suspend permits for the supply of weapons from Estonia to a nation preparing to defend itself and against an aggressor." Now, we should obviously recognize the fact that Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and Russia has stated publicly that one of its geopolitical aims is for Ukraine to remain that way under the, quote, Russian sphere of influence. We're not going to go back into the historical precedents of why it might want to, or whether you might feel differently if you're Ukrainian. But one thing's for sure, the average Ukrainian is getting ready for what could be a very tense situation. And most of us who are sitting in NATO would say that now's probably a time for us to come together, and possibly might get a bit frustrated when things don't go that way. It seems like Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki shares that. He appears to link the move to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project, saying that the black scenario of which Poland has been warning for a long time is finally coming true. And I quote, "The construction of Nord Stream 2, Russia's gas blackmail, involving billions invested by Putin in Europe, as well as the money invested in former politicians and lobbyists, gives him the tools to terrorize European countries one by one." Well, if you do drive a wedge between allies, if you do have this influence of which the Polish Prime Minister speaks, then you do get to influence the outcome. And it does seem like Ukraine is not being supported by Estonia. Partly, at least, it would be wise to draw an inference because of this relationship that it has with Germany, who is of course, a very important player in the European scene. Although the Polish Prime Minister wrote this in rather a polite way, one can rather sense the irritation and frustration. For many Poles, I see historical precedents being played out. It can be difficult to be a small nation in the face of great powers playing the great game, again in quotation marks, and it can bring back painful memories. This is a region that knows what it's like to be occupied, that knows what the price of freedom is, that knows that in a time of danger, allies, support, and partners are needed more than ever. And any attempt to appease the tiger or feed the crocodile generally tends to end in pain and misery. So I share the irritation of the Polish Prime Minister, and I think this is something that many people, if you can write, if you can send in a message and say, hey, this is not the way this thing works. We don't have to go back too far in history, only to our parents' generation to know how this thing goes. And although the situation is very different, the weapons are different, the intelligence is different, the communication flows are different, everything's different, and yet everything is the same. History does not repeat, but it certainly does rhyme. So with that in mind, are you frustrated by the sign that Germany is blocking Estonia from exporting arms to Ukraine? Do you think it even matters now that the UK and the US are sending these arms. One thing's for sure, by the time we publish this story, it could be that things have taken a turn for the worse. Make sure you monitor the What's Up Poland channel. We regularly post stories about Poland, anything to do with its culture, history, travel, the people, the places, the weird, the wacky, the wonderful, and the disturbing, as well as the topical. Do come and visit thefirstnews.com and check out more of these episodes across this channel, and do share them, and please do write under the comments. I promise you I read all of your comments and I'd love to know what you think about the story. I'll see you again for another episode of What's Up Poland.